In the late 1880s, when I first dipped my mental toe into the muddy waters of psychiatry, the field concerned itself in the main with chronically disordered individuals whose treatment, such as was available, was confined within asylum walls, or such overcrowded hospitals where the deranged were managed and contained. The moral treatment system espoused in the early 1800s had largely been abandoned due to the ever-increasing number of inmates, and it wasn't until the Austrian neurologist Edmund Freud first published his theories on the unconscious roots of certain mental disorders in 1891 that such maladies began again to be viewed as treatable. His influential publications, not least Es gibt mehr draußen als drinnen sind, formed a new testament to enlightened, forward-thinking practitioners such as I, and I quickly became an enthusiastic convert and disciple. I have often since pondered long and hard on the memory of one or two very curious individuals that were known to me in my student days. Individuals who were neither confined nor diagnosed, but that walked amongst us. One in particular comes vividly to mind, for he caused me to question my very own sanity. For some months I knew Mohr only by surname, as the unseen occupant of the rented room next to mine. He was thus referred to as the Mohr next door, if he was referenced at all. Occasionally I imagined I heard him through the adjoining wall, banging about or muttering to himself. But on such rare occasions as I was home of an evening, I was mostly too busy practicing my bassoon to notice. Mrs. Shambles, the landlady of our common lodging-house, seemed unusually reticent to discuss him. This was extraordinary in itself, as she was generally known to freely express her opinions on any given topic, whether said opinions were solicited or not. But the only snippet of information I could prize from her lips in regard to Mohr was that he had been under her roof for years, and she had had no cause to complain. It was during this time that I regularly had to attend the local mental institution at all hours of the night, in my capacity as junior doctor and as part of the terms of my qualification. Upon returning from one of these visits in the early hours of the morning, I was surprised to find, on reaching the darkened landing where my room was situated, a grandfather clock standing in shadow against the wall, something which I was certain it had not been doing when I had taken my leave earlier. It appeared to tower over 6 feet tall, broad and solid of frame, with a round white face, hands pointing to 20 to 4, and with a pendulum of unusual length. It was only as I drew closer that I realized it was, in fact, not a clock, but a naked man. The pale face was a man's face, the hands were moustaches, and the pendulum need not be elaborated upon further. The door to Mohr's room was open a crack, and it was he, I assumed, who now stood as stiff and silent as stone opposite, his eyes transfixed upon it, yet seemingly unable to approach. I pushed the door wide and gently led him in. The gas jet on the wall was burning low, casting a meagre light over the proceedings. The room was but sparsely furnished with a brass bed and a few other sticks of essential furniture. I guided him to the bed, and, having settled him down, I left him with a note beside the bed, explaining that the doctor who had found him was just next door, if further assistance was needed. I slept late into the afternoon, then spent my evening cramming for an upcoming exam. Nothing stirred next door as far as I could tell. I ate my dinner in my room, and when Mrs. Shambles came to collect the dishes, I inquired after my neighbour's welfare, without mentioning the events of the previous night. "He is normally a late riser," was all she would volunteer. I had once again resumed my studies when there came a tap at my door. Mohr entered in, though thankfully he was both lucid and fully dressed. I gestured for him to take the comfortable chair beside the fire, whilst I remained seated at my desk. "I believe I owe you a debt of gratitude," he began, "though I have no memory of last night's events." "This morning's, rather," I corrected him. "You were sleepwalking." He blushed. "I sleep in the nude." 'Tis no matter, I am a doctor and have signed the Hippocratic oath.
It is fortunate, and I thank ye.
And you are feeling fully recovered?
Recovered? Yeah,
he replied, but seemed a little vague. It was your first time sleepwalking?
I don't rightly know.
He looked deeply troubled. Then you should perhaps consider wearing a nightshirt in future? He nodded. Before I became a medical student, I had, by inclination, long been a student of human nature, and I brought the skills I had acquired over the years into play at that moment. He was a fine-looking fellow, with a military bearing, well turned out in his appearance and understated in his manner. His eyes had yet to meet mine, and his hands tremoured ever so slightly, a fact he seemed aware of and struggled to control.
"Forgive me," he said. "We have yet to be formally introduced. My name is Mohr, Roger Mohr."
Somebody has to be, I supposed. "And I am Dr. Henry Lessing, delighted to make your acquaintance, finally, Mr. Mohr. I gather you have something of a reclusive nature." Mohr stood abruptly and made to leave.
"I hope," he stammered, "that I shall not disturb you again in the night."
The urgency of his flight puzzled me exceedingly, but I was still more surprised when he added,
"I trust you are never otherwise disturbed in the night."
"I am seldom here," I replied. "I am required most nights at the hospital just now."
"That is good,"
he nodded gravely.
"But should it ever be the case, please do let me know at once."
And with that he left my room. I heard him enter his own and close his door with a finality that struck me as marked. Work and study had kept me fully occupied from the night of my first acquaintance with Roger Mohr, yet I can neither explain or understand why he intruded upon my thoughts with such unremitting regularity. There had been something strangely disconcerting about him. I felt troubled, though I knew not why. Certainly he had not encouraged any familiarity, nor sought to solicit any concern on my part, but still he lurked in the nether reaches of my consciousness, always. It so happened that, shortly thereafter, I was given a rare night off, and, after a pleasant repast with some student chums, had planned to have an early night of it. But the sound of voices, plainly audible on the other side of the adjoining wall, roused me from my slumbers some time after midnight. Mohr appeared to have a guest, and their heated discourse permeated the party wall. I could barely catch more than snatches of conversation from the other side, and strained my ear to listen. "Stick it in! Stick it in!" a stranger's voice implored.
"It won't fit, it won't,"
came Mohr's desperate rejoinder.
"It's too big."
"Try again! Stick it in, Rog!"
"I'm afraid it'll go off in my hand, Jim,"
Mohr exclaimed. "Here, let me try."
"Oh!"
Then came the sound of rampant, furious physical activity, closely followed by an almighty bang that seemed to shake the very foundations of the lodging-house. I fully expected an uproar from my fellow residents following the sound of the explosion. But nothing happened. Nothing at all. The silence was deafening. The impulse stirred within me to rouse myself and go next door to see if any help was needed. But I did not, and am ashamed to this day because of it. For, if I had done so, the consequences might not have been so very catastrophic. When Mrs. Shambles brought breakfast to my room that next morning, I asked, as casually as I was able, if she had not been disturbed in the night by the sound of a loud commotion. She regarded me queerly. "No, Dr. Lessing, indeed I was not. Are you sure it wasn't just a nightmare you experienced?" She didn't wait for an answer, but asked instead if I had any laundry, as it was wash day, and went on to complain at length about Mr. Bustard on the second floor and his crusty sheets. Once she had taken her leave, Mohr's odd insistence that I was to inform him if ever I was otherwise disturbed in the night sprang again to mind. As I dipped a soldier into my lightly boiled egg, I decided to do that very thing at the earliest opportunity. The earliest opportunity soon presented itself with a knock at my door.
"May I come in?"
came Mohr's voice. "You may," I replied. As he entered my room, his face was pale and gaunt, his eyes bulging from their sockets.
"You should have told me at once,"
he said, glaring at me fixedly and directly for the very first time. I flinched reflexively, for I saw in his cold, hard stare the unmistakable signs of madness in the man. It was something I had not been aware of before.
"Mrs. Shambles told me of your night-time disturbance."
"And did you not hear it also?"
"That is not the point. Promise me you will call me immediately if such a thing ever happens again."
I said I would. Then he was gone, in the instant, avoiding further discourse. It occurred to me in the coming days that in total I had barely exchanged a dozen sentences with Roger Mohr, and yet he remained ever present in my psyche. I slept fitfully and experienced the most disturbing dreams, largely in the German language. Odd then perhaps that just over a week later, returning home from my duties around 2 a.m, I passed Mohr's room without giving him a second thought. It is true I was fatigued beyond my endurance, having had to wrestle several patients into their straitjackets during the course of the evening, and so it was perhaps not so surprising that I rushed to undress and climb into bed in the hope of a night of untroubled sleep. But it was not to be. I had barely dozed off when I was rudely awakened by the familiar cry, "Stick it in! Stick it in!" I gave a violent start. Then, dragging my weary carcass out of bed, I pulled on my dressing gown and stepped into my slippers before venturing out into the corridor. The voices were louder out there. I tapped on the door, and, without waiting for a response, I turned the knob. The door yielded effortlessly, and I burst in to find, to my shock and amazement, not the interior of Mohr's room with its brass bed and few sticks of furniture, but a foreign battlefield in the throes of action. The 2 artillerymen nearest to me were intent on positioning a shell in the barrel of a front-loading field gun. A uniformed Mohr was one of those men.
"It won't fit, it won't," came Mohr's desperate rejoinder. "It's too big."
"Try again. Stick it in, Rog."
"I'm afraid it'll go off in my hand, Jim,"
Mohr exclaimed. "Here, let me try."
"Ah!"
The 2 men wrestled with the shell, and eventually they somehow managed to maneuver it into place. Mohr rushed to light the fuse, and then both men, dripping with perspiration, breathing heavily and wary of recoil, took refuge some distance behind the gun. Seconds passed, every muscle straining, every nerve jangling in expectation. And then,
boom!
I came to my senses slowly. I was looking up into a starry sky, with the first flakes of winter snow skittering down from the heavens before settling on my upturned face. I raised myself up by the elbows and looked around me. I was lying in the ruins of the lodging house. Not a wall, not an outhouse was standing. I made a quick inventory of my extremities and found, to my immense relief, that each could be communicated with. The nightmare seemed to be over. Whatever over meant. Or nightmare, come to that. Then, suddenly, my eyes fell upon the prostrate body of Mrs. Shambles, who lay at some short distance away. Her face was exceedingly pale and wan, but her expression was strangely resolute as she turned it towards me. I hurried to her side and knelt down, but, confronted with the severity of her injuries, I felt as helpless as a newborn babe, and rivulets of tears fast flowed from my eyes and ran down my face. "Don't cry for me, Doctor," she smiled benevolently. "I go to a better place. No more clearing up after folk. No more crusty sheets. I go to be with my beloved son." I didn't know you had lost a son," I replied, unsure if she had ever mentioned him, but aware that I had taken precious little time to listen to her ramblings in the past. and regretting it now. "One son. James he was called. Jimmy I called him." She took my hand. "Roger, Mr. Mohr, called him Jim." "Mr. Mohr?" "Yeah, they were bosom pals. They joined the Royal Artillery together. He was with my Jimmy when Jimmy was hit by an enemy shell. Jimmy died and Roger never recovered. That's why I've taken special care of him since he came out of hospital. Jimmy would have wanted that, see?" No trace of Roger Mohr was ever found, though fortunately all the other occupants by Mrs. Shambles escaped unharmed. A thorough investigation of events concluded that the devastating blast had been due to a faulty gas pipe. Perhaps it was. Perhaps it was all one long, horrible nightmare. But I remain not entirely convinced, for there are still times when I lie in my bed, listening to the grandfather clock in the hall chime midnight, and it is then I could swear I hear the ghostly voice of Jim Shambles urging his dearest pal Roger to "Stick in! Stick in!"